I'm Ron Gallagher at Maximum Velocity Physical Therapy, and you're listening to HYPERSPEED Radio. You don't have to live in pain, whether you're running, swimming, playing a team sport, or just everyday fitness. We bridge a gap between medicine and strength and conditioning to help you break through at MVPT. What's up, everybody? This is the HYPERSPEED Radio podcast, and today I am stoked to bring actually some mentors of mine to the show. I'm super excited to have two major players in the triathlon community here, if not legends. They probably wouldn't like that description, but are living legends in the triathlon community. And they have their own show that I was on last week, and they graciously accepted an invitation to come and hang out on my show. And I want to do something a little bit different with them today. They are both professors and very highly educated and very highly experienced triathletes. And I want to talk to the athletes. And I don't think that they get to that place very often. Because they do so much teaching. So without further ado, we have Professor Ted Girard and Dr. John Mercer. And welcome to the show, guys.
Oh, thank you very much for having us. We had a great time last week on our show, and really excited to come talk to you on your show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again for last week. That was a lot of fun. So I got a couple of major races from these guys. Believe me, there's far more races. And the reason why I want to start with this is these guys as athletes are insanely well accomplished, and I really want to talk to those guys because I'm fascinated by how knowledgeable you are about anatomy and physiology and the things that you do daily as a professor, how that influences your training, and then how that training influences your confidence and your mental state, as a very accomplished triathlete. So they probably wouldn't tell anybody how, accomplished they are, but if we're really paying attention, these are the major races that John's done. He said most memorable. There's probably at least 1,000 more. Norseman, which for those of you that don't know, and please correct me if I get any of these details wrong, because I've been trying to research it. He actually had a wetsuit specially made for the temperature of the water when he jumps from this ferry into the water in Norway. And it's an Ironman distance race, but the water is insanely cold.
The water's cold. The bike ride is up, just up.
Up, right? So it's like 40 miles of up?
You know what? I did go back and look at the elevation profile, but it's somewhere around 10 or 11,000 feet of climbing, I'm pretty sure.
So it's a ridiculous amount of gain on the bike. Yeah. And then the run is nothing to shake a stick at, and it's the same exact distance as Ironman triathlon, but it's much more harsher conditions. There's circumstances around that race that I think are absolutely fascinating and in my mind legendary. But he also did qualify and race Kona, which is the Ironman World Championship, which means he's top 2% of athletes in the world. And if, like I said, if you ask him about this stuff, he'll never tell you. 70.3 World Championship in Nice, Ironman Japan, which I think is amazing. And then the legendary local race called Silverman that our new people have no idea what they're missing. It was a world-class race right at home. And John did the full twice on the old course, which included Lakeshore, the Three Sisters, and College, all the way down the big nasty hills on the bike.
That's right.
And then the run was nasty, multiple loops out in Henderson around the multi-gen. So if anybody runs out there, they know those hills are ridiculous. And it was two loops of that. So that's an amazing accomplishment in itself. I raced it in 2009, 2010.
I think I was 2009 and 2010 as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was considerably far behind you.
But iconic race.
Yes, very proud. That was my first half iron was Silverman, so that was a lot to chew. But Ted equally as accomplished, 5-time 70.3 World Championships, which means top 1% of the world at that particular distance. 1-time Ironman World Championships, which is Kona, the Big Daddy.
Oh, not Kona, just to say. I did it at St. George.
Yep. Gotcha. Recently.
Yep.
Oh yeah, how was your day?
Good.
Good.
Good day.
Because there was a lot of bad days that day. 2017 ITU Long Curls World Championship, which he received a bronze medal. That's 3rd place.
Yep.
2019 USAT Long Term National Champion, which he didn't put there. He did mention gold medal, but we're going to say champion. So my first question is, now that we have it out there, these are, well, first of all, let's talk about Norseman, because the funny thing about Norseman, maybe not so much at the time, was your bike was lost on the way there.
Yeah,
So tell me about that.
That was a classic race right from the get-go. So yeah, the Norseman is over in Norway, and actually you have to get in early and get into lottery to get picked for it. It's really hard to actually get.
You have to
a slot.
apply, right?
That's right.
So when I say apply, you have to have a body of accomplishments in order to even be considered, and then there's a lottery.
Yeah, and they advertise
John got in.
This is not a race you want to do. That's what they say, and
Right.
it's iconic. So,
Yes.
anyways, I was down here visiting with Dean Jackson, the owner of Who Design, who we've done some work on wetsuit type of work, and we were at dinner, and he said, "Hey,
You want to plug them?
Hoop Design.
Yeah, Hoop Design
Yeah.
rose to the occasion and got you all fitted up.
We were sitting across the table and we got talking about races, and he says, "Hey, I'm sponsoring this race, Norseman. I got an entry. Do you want to do it?" And I sat there for a second. I said, "Yeah, I'll do that."
Absolutely.
I had heard about it, and
Yeah.
it's just one of those races, not really thinking about the logistics. So,
Right.
So yeah, my wife and I planned it out, and we had everything set to fly into Copenhagen and then make our way up to Eidsfjord for the race. And along the way, our bike never made it. And so we kept checking, and we had about 2 weeks before the event that we were trying to find
2
it.
weeks?
Yeah, and we could not. The bike could not be located, and really, it was probably never made the plane. It was probably most likely in Las Vegas still.
Oh my God, sitting somewhere?
Yeah. But what made that race special was the folks in Norway, the other competitors, all of a sudden just started chipping in. Someone got me a bike. Someone got me run shoes. Someone got me, well, actually I had my run shoes, bike shoes, got me a helmet. And it was just all this community effort to get me to the start line.
Yeah,
and
it gives me chills.
And I was, just so thankful and appreciative. And so the race was, one part of it, but just building, in essence, that international community.
Absolutely.
Which was so neat to be part of.
Absolutely. Triathletes around the world
Yeah.
rose up,
Yep.
and you raced this nasty race on somebody else's bike.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah,
It's absolutely amazing to me.
I was lucky that towards the end I was starting to shift the gears and felt like the cable was a little loose, and ultimately finished the race and talked with the owner. And I said, "I think your cable's loose. I think I'll have to replace that for you." He said, "Oh no, that's the way it was. I just didn't want to tell you because it's almost going to break." So,
Oh my gosh.
no,
That's amazing.
It was fantastic, and in that race, you have to have your own support. And so my wife Laura was the support crew, and it was really a team effort. And to be able to do it and finish it, and to get a black shirt was really a great.
So the black shirt represents a finisher.
That's right. And so they don't actually do age group awards. They'll award the top 3 overall,
Right.
but they don't do any other acknowledgments for age groups or any other awards.
Right.
Except you get a black shirt if you're in the top, 130. And so the whole goal is to be in the top 130 athletes. And, and to you get to a certain checkpoint, and then you're good to go. and you get to go up to the top of Gusta Top, and that's your
Yeah.
reward for
Right.
being there. And,
Yeah, the pictures are amazing.
yeah, and it's like climbing Charleston, in terms of people who are local here.
Right.
And it was just really a great experience all around, and to share it with my wife was really wonderful.
Oh, man.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. How much of the race did she do?
well, she was in the car throughout the bike ride, so she would have to leapfrog me to be able to get me aid wherever we needed. And we had it all worked out because the weather changes, and so we had different gear to switch out, and she was able to provide food and what have you.
Yeah.
And then the same thing on the run, she was able to leapfrog to a certain spot, and then I had to go up what's called Zombie Hill, and it's called Zombie Hill because it's really a walker. It's really hard to run that. But at the top
That's
of Zombie
amazing.
Hill, then I would meet up with her again and then finish the last 5K up to top of Gusta Toppen. And then she would have to run down. I could take the tram down.
Yeah.
So
That's
she had a
amazing.
full day as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What an experience. But the thing that I've been thinking about since that time, when all this was sort of coming to us via Facebook,
Yeah.
was the ultimate confidence in your ability to multitask. We touched on this last week. Can you talk to me about that? Like, I want to talk to John Mercer, the athlete who did this. In my opinion, an amazing feat because of the circumstances around that. And I think it had to be something to do with mental strength, mental confidence about your ability to multitask or problem solve.
We talk about triathlon as being, especially long course, all about problem solving, and you got to identify it and then figure out a solution. And then if that doesn't work, you have to try another solution. And so, no, you're spot on. It's the mentality, I think, of going to these events. But leading up to that event, I think what gave me the confidence that I could ride someone else's bike and be in someone else's shoes was all the training leading up to it. And we talk all the time about enjoying the journey. You really have to. It's a long-term process to be able to get to that start line and then work your way through to the finish line. And it is problem solving, and it is trying to just manage all these other pieces that can get overwhelming, but you learn, just knock off one thing at a time. This is what I can do right now.
Right.
Do this and then move on to the next step.
Right. So when up until Norseman, how many full irons had you done leading up to that?
Boy, by the time I did Norseman, I probably had done 10 or 12 at that point. So
Going through those battles, you probably had some close DNFs, some really hot, really windy, really swim was bad, kicked in the mouth. Those moments all stack up, and then here you are in Norway with problem solving on the top of your list.
Oh, that's right. And, there are times where you can't solve the problem. And I do have, I don't know how many races I've done, but I know I've got 3 DNFs. I think I've done 18.
Yeah.
And
Good Lord.
And so,
That's amazing.
Sometimes you reach a point that you cannot continue, or it's not smart to continue.
Right.
And that's tough that's a tough pill to swallow, but it is the reality of these events is
Absolutely.
that they are challenging. And
for sure.
So it's
Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I never really got a chance to sit down and actually talk to you about that. We're mostly in passing when we see each other. So I've always thought really, really highly of you as a result of that, and just the way everybody was talking about it here on Facebook. It was like every person in the Las Vegas Triathlon Club was tuned in, and then that spawned these conversations. And then it was like, did you hear what happened to John? Did you hear what happened to John? Can you believe what John did? John. And it was absolutely fascinating to watch all that. No, it's amazing. It's amazing. And some similar things have happened with Ted in that, he goes to these big monster races and wins them. So just much like John, I'm curious about the process of, your didactic life, as much as you are involved in the athletic training program and all the things that you learn. How does that influence, like, coaching yourself? Do you have a coach?
Just me.
So
I have a swim coach. How do you manage
How do you manage that part?
Yeah, that part is tough. I'm not going to lie. It's I oftentimes, well, first of all, I know I bore my students with triathlon stories. And I honestly have to be really careful about that because, my mind is almost always revolving around something in triathlon. And I have to give stories about, my past life when I worked with soccer or worked with another sport.
Right.
Because my students aren't interested in triathlon.
Right. It's kind of specialized.
It is specialized.
At what point did it become triathlon? Because I do remember you being, as one of my professors, you were more involved in soccer.
Yep. So I was working as an athletic trainer locally with soccer teams and then internationally with soccer teams as well. And
I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah. So I think I did 13 international tours with
nice.
USA Soccer.
Oh, that's amazing.
Working with the teams and doing that. And, just one day kind of things switched and I wanted out of that life. I had this crazy schedule where I was working like 1 to 9, 1 to 10 every day, and every weekend was a soccer tournament down in LA all the time.
It's a thankless job.
It was a grind, honestly.
It is definitely a grind.
It was a grind, but I think that actually prepared me for triathlon, right? Because triathlon's a grind.
Right.
And the long story, I mean, this isn't really answering your question, but the long story, I don't think a lot of people know this, is I got pretty sick and, had some serious liver issues.
Oh.
And
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. And so, I had a conversation with my doctor, and fortunately he was a sports medicine doctor I knew through, working with USA Soccer and stuff. And he basically told me, he said, hey, you need to get fit and you need, because I was heavy. I mean, I was heavier and I was not the most healthy person, but I knew how to do it.
Right.
I was just always taking care of others. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
And so my wife was doing triathlon for years before I was.
Around what year was that?
This is like 2008. Yeah.
So you went from sedentary to Ironman world championship type caliber.
Yeah.
Shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I was 206 pounds at my heaviest and not well. And my doctor was just like, hey, listen, like, there's no drugs for this. This is like, you've got to change your life.
Yeah.
And like I said, my wife was doing triathlon and I couldn't understand it. I just couldn't understand why you'd wake up in the morning and go do that.
Right. 4-hour bike ride?
Not
happening.
Like in the heat and go for these runs and come home and just look horrible. Not that my wife looks horrible, but you know how it is, right?
Right.
And so my wife, we had a conversation and we started, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start running again. Cause I used to run, another fun fact is I used to orienteer at a really high level in Canada.
And for those of you who don't know orienteer.
So orienteering is running in the forest with a map and running from point to point in places you're unfamiliar with. Right. And so I actually was fortunate enough to compete at the national championships in Canada.
And angles and logistics.
So I had that running background and I could always run. So I said, okay, I'm going to start running again.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy it.
Right.
Now, I didn't enjoy it in the beginning when I could only go 400 meters. Right?
Yeah. That's a tough pill to swallow.
But once again, like I had the intelligence and the academic background to do this. And I said, I'm going to do it. And I can still remember, that first 5K and oh my gosh, it was so hard. And,
right.
So then I started running, and then my wife, she's like,
which is hard for me to imagine because I'm used.
I'm 39,
to,
right? 38, 39 when I'm doing this.
I'm used to seeing these Facebook videos of Ted like sprinting to the finish, and I'm having a hard time remembering thinking about first 5K and wanting to die.
And I see those pictures, right? And but my wife
that makes it extra special.
Yeah, she basically asked me for her birthday if I would do a triathlon, and this was like 6 months before. She's like, I think she was turning 30, and she's like,
what distance?
And she, just a sprint. She's like, I want you to do triathlon. I want you to experience this. I think you're really gonna like it. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know how to swim. I literally did not know how to swim. And
so 25 from one end of the pool would have been.
Well, I can remember the first swim I did, and I think I did 100, and I thought I killed the world, right? Like it took me probably 5 minutes because I do like 25 and stand at the other end. Oh man, I can't breathe.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna commit to this though, and I completely committed for like 4 months, and I went swimming by myself because I was so embarrassed. My wife had a swim. My wife actually runs an adult swim team, and I couldn't go because I knew all these people socially because they were all her friends.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not going to go till I can swim 500.
Right.
Right.
I mean, as the A-type personality, it's really hard to learn in front of others like that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I didn't own a bike. I hadn't biked in years. Same thing. And I had a friend in the triathlon community. She lent me a bike, and I started riding. And same thing, like going from Dunkin' Donuts out to the overlook and back.
Right.
And man, that's the day. I can't do anything for the rest of the day because that hour was crushed me. Right. And so to think of that and to think of that journey.
Oh my God.
To where ultimately I've ended up is to me it's pretty fun to think about. But
absolutely.
But I use that journey to inspire my students, and I use it not in one particular thing that I teach, but just that you can do anything. Right. You can be where you are now, and it doesn't mean you can't do whatever you want.
Right.
I had a student in my office. This is 4 or 5 years ago, and he sat down. I still remember. He's like, "My dream is to work in the NFL." I'm like, "Okay. Let's come up with a plan for you."
Right.
It's a tough gig getting a job in the NFL. And I said, this is a long-term goal. We need to build slowly and progressively. And I explained like how this happens in triathlon and how you can do this. And you know what? He actually works in the NFL now.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, right? When you take that approach, the long game approach.
Right.
And so many of the students, and I think John will agree with this, have such short-term vision. Right? It's the now culture. It's I need this now, or it's not thinking of 4 or 5 years down the road.
Do you
and
think
building.
that's a 20-year-old problem and that's been happening for years, or is that like
I don't know because I'm 50, right? I don't know, but I think it's been happening forever. Right. But those that are truly successful have somebody that mentors them.
Yes.
And teaches them that's the way. Right. And I call it, building your toolbox, right? You got to build your toolbox over time. And the more tools you put in that toolbox and the more skills you end up having, the more successful you're going to be. And I think that happens in triathlon as well.
1,000%.
I don't know.
That's exactly John what we were talking about with the problem solving leading up to Norseman was all the toolbox tools you developed over time.
No, very much so. And we've talked a lot about how we like to see triathlon approach as a lifestyle. And do something sustainable. Ted's been doing this for a while. I started back in 1985. I took a break along the way and restarted 2007. So the second career, now what are we, 15 years into?
Right.
I mean, that's a long time, to get up, every day and do something training wise.
Absolutely.
But if you have that mindset that it is a long-term goal, then you can do that, and it's building along the way.
The mindset that I see from you guys is that it doesn't matter what happens on any given day. If I take it one at a time, I'm going to be able to manage whatever happens. Yeah. And I think if you're a new triathlete, like that simplifies the whole process. Because what we love about it is that we can program these 3 sports and then include nutrition and then include recovery. So there's tons and tons and tons of programming, but it always comes down to the brain and the ability to problem solve and be confident when that moment comes. And so that's what I really wanted to get to with you. So now I'm extra fascinated. How does a person go from new to triathlon, trying to change my life and just get healthy, to winning world championships?
Well, I never won a world championship, national championship.
National championship.
Third place in the world in that one. But really what it came down to, I had to become a student of the sport.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't know much about it. Like I told you, I didn't know how to swim, didn't own a bike. I knew how to run.
Well, I would say that you didn't know about the specific biomechanics of those sports.
Exactly.
But you knew about periodization and training and being around sports.
Yep. I was around high-level athletes and high-level coaches. And I saw, and you learn the tricks of the trade, right? And number one is to take it slow. It really is. And to build over time. But I truly became a student of triathlon. And any piece of information I could get, any video I could watch, any podcast I could listen to, any book I could read,
Right.
any person I could talk to. And John, John was a mentor of mine in triathlon. I used to bounce ideas off him all the time and get
sure.
information from him.
For sure.
And I would be a sponge.
Which is why the
sponge.
podcast happened in the first place, right? Because those conversations are probably
Still happening.
Yeah.
super informative.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I like about them is, I hear these two juggernauts going back and forth. It's cool.
No, we love talking triathlon, and yeah, we had a lot of hallway conversations at work, and then we got involved with the Tri Club and help that along, and along the way we, when COVID came along, we were moving everything remotely, and these conversations we would have, and we're like, we should do this as a podcast, or at least
For sure.
live stream some of these
Right.
conversations.
So as part of so John Mercer is the Las Vegas Triathlon Club president, and I can say he's doing a fantastic job. Love what you're doing with the community, which is why I want back in. That's why I want to sponsor, is because I just love what you guys are
Thank
doing,
you.
and I see the community growing in leaps and bounds, and it's fun to be a part of that increase. And I'm getting more triathletes as patients again,
Good.
and so I just want to have a presence back in that community. My personal journey was that I was getting kind of burned out with hyperspeed. It was just tons and tons and tons and tons of triathlon all the time. So now I feel myself coming back to it. So
Good.
it's, inspired by you guys a lot. What shows does the Tri Club have? I know they do like a member spotlight.
Yep.
They do, what else?
That-
Because you
that's-
guys do a show.
Yep, and then we do another, just a member spotlight each week. We like to feature a member of the Tri Club.
And we have Kona qualifiers and first timers and everything in between.
It's amazing. And what I really like is getting someone on the show that I don't know and
Yeah.
just hearing their story.
Yeah.
And I
Because
just,
the story is always amazing.
it's
The
inspiring.
humans
Yeah.
in this inspirational
Yeah.
situation is amazing.
No, and so, like Ted's story, and you've got to see the pictures of when he pre-triathlon to where he is now. I mean,
Maybe we'll post that in the comments.
yeah.
We can do that.
It's inspiring, and a lot of people don't know. I mean, they look at athletes who are performing really well at events and thinking, oh, that's just natural, and it's not. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of hurdles that you have to overcome to
I
be able
mean,
to get there.
if I've been in the Las Vegas Triathlon Club for 2 months and I see Ted,
Yeah.
there's no way he was ever a beginner,
right.
So it's really cool that it wasn't that long ago that he was new to this.
Yeah.
That's even more fascinating
And that's
about
good for me too, right? Because when I go out to our local races and I see that was me, right?
Yeah.
And I can and
Yeah.
I'll help those people. And
Yeah.
if you're ever out there, you're listening to this and you need help, and you're at those races, come to John or I.
that's the whole purpose
know,
of the club, really.
It really is the purpose of the club. And
Yeah.
because we all started somewhere.
Absolutely.
And, I think that triathlon is so great because I don't feel like there's a lot of ostracizing the newbies, right? We were all new to this at one point,
Right.
and it's
Right.
tough. Like you said, it's tough and it's a commitment, and and sometimes we forget that, or some people forget,
Right.
forget that. But I like what you said. Like you look once again, look at John. You're like, oh, he's just naturally talented.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's been doing this since 1985.
yeah. If you were to look at John's training logs, the hours that he's put in,
Right.
Consistently 15 hours a week or more for
Yeah.
years.
Let's talk about that because I'm curious about that. From an athlete point of view, right? Not Dr. Mercer. From an athlete point of view, how has your do you have a coach?
I do not.
So how has your training over time morphed?
Well, I like to think, looking back, and I actually look back at some of my training logs back in the day, and what I
Is
do
this
now.
your training log here?
This is more current. I didn't bring the earlier one, but
So you're doing it by hand?
I've moved away from my analog log, so my analog version, which is handwriting it.
Yeah.
I do digital now, but
Gotcha.
but I have a story very similar to Ted, and did my triathlon career. I actually hit a point where I recognized that I was not able to break through to the higher level triathlete. I was doing my master's program at the point, and actually asked someone for a letter of reference, and he put in the letter. He says, "Great, all this academic stuff," and then he says, "And great triathlete, regionally competitive. And I took that. And at first I was like, oh man, that hurts. I'm thinking of myself as nationally competitive.
Right.
But then when I stop and I really assess, I was regionally competitive.
Right.
And at that point I said, you know what? We're building a young family. I've got to commit to that. And so, you know, my career then went more academic. And so then for 14 years, you know, doing my PhD work and, you know, getting started in the job down here at UNLV. And then our kids grew up and they didn't need us anymore. And so
Right.
we were looking at my wife and I are looking at each other, what are we going to do?
Right.
And she said, well, I'm going to get back into triathlon. Well, along the way, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh.
And so at that point, I was really struggling with even doing any type of exercise and doing really anything. And I said, okay, I'm going to get back. I gained weight as well as of 216 pounds. And, you know, I went back and I said, okay.
Not John Mercer.
Story.
I literally started back out.
I thought he was Superman this whole time. Superman this whole time.
No, I was literally running 1 minute at a time, getting back into it.
And how long ago was that?
That was, I started back right around 2007. I was diagnosed in 2001 and I just felt I needed to take charge of where I was as best I could, and could not find the right medicine that was working. I would have days that my elbow would flare up and I couldn't even move it. And it was really, it was hard and confusing. And, but you know, starting off just 1 mile or 1 minute at a time, and then 3 minutes at a time, and then worked up. And then eventually I reached the point where I said, you know what, I'm going to take control of this. I'm going to sign up for an Ironman. And that's when I signed up for Ironman Japan, and just try to really take control over the disease as best that I could. And so I think I'm thankful every time I can exercise, and every day I do actually try to give myself a nudge and say, you know what, a long time ago you couldn't do any of this.
Yeah.
And so now,
Yeah.
you know, there's a little strength or a little bit of motivation to keep getting out there and trying to do something every day.
John, that's outstanding. That is an amazing start
You know,
to this triathlon career. I should say restart.
you know.
I honestly thought it was just Superman all the time, and that you're just so gracious with everybody, every event, and it's just so cool to hear that. How has your, I mean, mental strength has been a challenge for all of us when we do this sport. How has your mental strength over these years from newbie trying to get your liver right to winning these races? Like that's the part that's the part I don't think people understand. I think people generally think that you just show up and you're the caliber that wins it, but like that's a race and there's tactics and that's on purpose. Like that's an intentional thing that happens when you win a race at that level. How has your mental strength changed over that time? Like what's interesting to you about your mental state as that ability has improved?
You know, it's an interesting question you have, because how do you build mental strength? Well, you have to overcome, in my opinion, right? So I can still remember like my first couple of years of racing, and I call it racing. I was finishing, right? Like,
Right.
and just being disappointed, right? By failing. Like I felt like I was failing. I'm in a race. My goal should be to win, and I didn't win. And
So your first
3
Olympic,
years,
and like you
3 or 4
finished
years,
10th
right?
in your age
Yeah.
group, and you look at that as failure.
yeah, I'm looking at it, that's failure. What can I do to be better? And I can still remember the local guys in, you know, the local races that were always beating me. And I had I had their names plastered in my head. They had no idea who I was, because you don't remember who finishes 10th, but
Right.
I knew who was winning.
Right.
I'm like, what do I have to do to win? And I look at their times. I'm like, well, he swam this, he biked this, he ran this.
Right.
Okay,
Those-
then the next race,
Those become goals.
Yeah, I couldn't bike that maybe, or I couldn't run that, but whatever the case may be, it was usually swimming. And so, you know, I started swimming an extra day, right? Like instead of 3 days a week, I'm like, okay, I need to swim 4 days a week. I don't know what he's doing. I have no idea even who he is, but I got to do more.
Right.
And so, same on the bike. It's like, well, I got to improve my bike. How do I improve my bike?
Just whittle it down.
Just whittle it down. Whittle it down.
Whittle it down.
And then next thing you know, I'm getting on some podiums, and I'm like, okay, this this is working, and the confidence builds.
So from start to finish, when do podiums start?
Probably year 3.
3 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the fitness and the training compounds on itself 3 years in a row in order to get to that place.
Yep. And then at year 3,
See, I don't think people realize that.
yeah.
I think people honestly think you just show up and that's you.
Oh,
like that's
no.
who you are.
No.
No. It's
So-
got to compound on itself enough times for you to get the fitness to do that.
And then I had a really dumb idea and signed up for my first 70.3, right? And because everyone was doing it. It was going to be in St. George, and everyone was doing it. It was 2014. And I finished like 50th in my age group.
2014.
Right?
That's not the year of the...
It wasn't the bad year.
It wasn't the bad year?
It was a hot year, but it wasn't bad. But I finished...
So the bad year, in case you don't know, is the year where...
It was 2011.
Where, it was 2011. Yeah. So the swells I hear were like 4 feet, right? So, yeah. They took the swim out.
No, they swam.
They swam it, or it was...
They pulled a lot of people out.
Swim.
Yeah. They pulled a lot of people out.
Dangerous swim.
But anyways, I finished 50th in my age group, and I thought I thought I was a badass because I was like, local races, I'm on the podium, right?
Right.
I'm like, well, what's the difference? 70.3 Olympic. I'm telling you, it was a big difference.
Right.
And I was really humbled that day.
Yeah.
And
50th out of...
I don't know, like 400 or something. I don't even know. But I'm thinking I'm going to be top 10, right? Because I don't know. I really didn't know.
Right. Naive.
And same thing. Like first, I'm like, I'll never do that again. But then within a day, I'm like signing up. Because we don't make any decisions right away.
Right.
But then I was like, same thing. I was like, well, how do I get to that next level? And I started looking at the people that are in the top 10. And I'm like, well, what did they swim? What did they bike? What did they run? So what do I have to do to compete? And I just was very methodical and broke it down. Like, this is what I have to do to continue to improve. Return the next year, I think I was 30th. And I'm like, okay, we're making progress, but it didn't happen overnight, right? Like and I think that you're right. I think a lot of people look at successful triathletes and they're like, oh, they just naturally have that.
Right.
Well, I didn't. I can tell you I didn't. It's still a battle for me to compete.
To think that the person who I see is shot out of a cannon finishing these races was 50th and then 30th. And then how many years later would you say you're top 10, top 5?
Pretty consistently, like 2017. So 3 years later, in the 70.3, and that's my favorite distance is 70.3. So about 3 years later,
roughly 6 years from the start.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yep. But like I said, it's a journey, right? It's definitely a journey.
And that's when the mental strength happens.
I really liked how Ted pointed out you have to have those failures. But because now you gotta take those and they sort of shape you and help you mature as a triathlete. But then the other part and I know Ted does this really well, and I try to do it as well, is you got to celebrate those victories that you have too. And it's okay to celebrate that you did something that you achieved. And you can't always be looking for those micro failures. Like someone will finish and say, well, maybe I needed to go a little faster here or a little faster. No, you did the race. This is what you could do that day.
PRs are
celebrate
PRs.
It. That's right. Just enjoy it. Yes, time to go back and be analytical about it and think about it and see where you can improve. But then you do have to have these failures, and it does happen. And
I mean, if you don't have 10 failures, you can't show up to Norseman and ride someone else's bike, somebody else's shoes, somebody else's helmet, and then get a black shirt.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think the failures are what makes us, right? And we talk about this in school all the time too. I talk to my students about this. I'm like, you have to make mistakes. You have to fail.
Right. And
you remember, like even on an exam, everyone in the audience can probably think of this, like an exam that they took, they remember the questions they got wrong way more than the ones they got right.
Absolutely.
And that's how we learn. And we just hope that the failures are small, right? But they should be memorable. Right. And like John and I have talked after many races, and it's interesting. We almost always go to what went wrong. Yep. Right? Oh man, I think we're talking about it at Oceanside. Both of us had sock issues. Mm-hmm. We instantaneously talk about the sock issues. I think John only had one sock. Right. And my socks were in my backpack against a fence. I'm like, I couldn't find them. I'm like, but just silly stuff like that.
So did you go without them?
No, I got my backpack, right? But this is like over 100 triathlons for John. I think I've done over 80. And we still make mistakes, but I won't make that mistake again. I hope I won't. Right. And that's I don't know if it's mental strength, but it's I don't know, it's
Experience.
experience, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go through those experiences, and
For sure.
And I think for new triathletes, that's a hard thing to wrap their head around. A lot of them want it to be perfect right away.
Right. We can't be all Justin.
No.
That dude's a beast.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's good. And and that's a good story. I mean, he's worked so hard to get to where he is, and
Yeah.
it's so neat to see
Yeah.
that. So,
And just jump right in with just
yeah,
hair on fire winning races.
yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's so cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I have a tradition that I have on the show, and then I always close up the show with what you're listening to. So if you're a patient in the clinic, you're going to hear good music. At least I hope it's good music. And we have a lot of discussion about music. So I'm curious, what does John Mercer listen to?
Well, on the way over, it's so funny. I was listening to a classic rock station and hearing AC/DC, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Yeah, that's classic rock
Brian,
now.
Yeah, Brian Adams. I mean,
Yeah.
so I was listening to that on the way here.
Yeah, which doesn't feel like classic rock to me, because that's 80s, right?
Right, right.
Classic rock to me is what my dad was listening to in the 70s,
Yeah.
but they call that vinyl rock.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we still had vinyl when I was going through high school and college. So I still have some vinyl 45.
Vinyl's
so,
coming back.
Yeah,
A lot of artists are putting cool things on vinyl these days.
good deal.
How about Ted?
Taylor Swift.
No way. No,
No,
way.
seriously, I
Get outta here.
really like her, and it's so funny. People think it's funny, but I have on my on my Spotify. I have
George,
my
you
Taylor
didn't see that
Swift.
come in, did you?
I was out on the field.
It's so funny. I really enjoy her, and I think she's a musical genius. I'm just gonna say that.
Wow.
Well,
What I'm fascinated with Taylor Swift is this whole record company
Oh,
thing.
it's so amazing how smart she's been.
the marketing and the business behind of getting her to own her own music,
Yeah.
and then to get the world to rally around her is one of the biggest
Yeah.
business moves I've ever seen.
It's
amazing.
It's amazing. But then,
Amazing.
but I do like music of, I guess, my youth as well. Like I'm really into that, and
Yeah.
I think it's the good thing is if you get older, as you get older, if you keep listening to more current music, your encyclopedia of music gets bigger.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I like music from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s, from
Yeah.
the O's, like.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. Like I can, especially when you're riding long distances, you're going for a 5-hour bike ride and you want to
Yeah.
put some music on. It doesn't really matter.
Right. Got to have some resources like that.
well, I got to tell my Taylor Swift story then. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
coming back from Searchlight and ended up
On
having
your
a really
bike.
good on the bike and having just a great segment there. Someone called up to me and says, "What were you doing?" I said, "Oh, I was listening to Taylor Swift."
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
How can you argue with that? It's all upbeat and happy and
I mean, that's definitely a mood adjuster.
well, because sometimes when you're out there for many hours, you can go into honestly. people
Las
don't
Vegas
realize this-
Triathlon Club,
Yeah.
you can thank me for the Taylor Swift that
you
came
go.
out of these two guys.
Because you can get into some dark places on some of these training rides.
Oh, for sure.
And sometimes you just need hey, just wake up song and happy
Yeah.
and
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm heading to Salt Lake City to see one of my favorite bands, kind of this new up and coming band called Black Pistol Fire.
all right.
So it's like this bluesy rock up and coming band. So
Yeah.
they're playing bigger and bigger festivals, getting bigger and bigger shows. So I'm pretty stoked to see that. So I want to thank John Mercer and Ted Girard for coming by and coming to the studio, seeing the clinic.
That's great.
Means the world to me. You guys wanted to come and talk triathlon with me, and super happy to get to know you guys more as people, because you guys have such a huge presence in the triathlon community as authorities in training and safety and just the organization of the club. And I think the people, the humans who make up you guys and your triathlon story is fascinating. So thanks for letting me get down to that. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So George, let's hear that sticky paws logo. Get us out of here.